So everyone wants to be a top producer in real estate, but very few are willing to do what top performing operators actually do. The problem is most people focus on the big moves, finding deals, raising capital, negotiating terms, but what separates the best from the rest isn't flash, it's habit. In this episode, John and we're going to be breaking down what the most overlooked daily habits are of elite multifamily operators. So, real estate investors as a whole, and how you can build them into your day to day rhythms to be able to execute, build momentum, and drive overall success. John, it's great to be here with you.
Mark, so good to be here. I just actually was a guest on a podcast right before we recorded this one. And, some of these topics were sort of coming up, those success indicators, those habits. And, the reality is in business, right? It's often the boring details done well and consistently that make all the difference, right? Those consistent habits and just getting those small details right. And you nailed it, right? Sometimes we celebrate the big closing, but, behind the scenes, for example, I gave the example that it takes us 300 deals to find one that works. And that came up in the context of how do you protect your investors? And it's like that conservative approach. And, he said that's very difficult to do because at the end of the day, to often really, and this is what I found at least, is that, top performers tend to be a little impatient, right? So if you're not careful, it's easy to creep into, well, even though this doesn't check that box, let's make an exception. But, we're fortunate that we have an incredible team around us. And the way we work is all five of us in terms of our investor committee have to be aligned before we make a decision. And so those boring, consistent habits are really what lead to that ultimate success. So I'm really excited to dive in and talk more about this.
So yeah, meeting every single day is one of those. It's very easy to get bored, right? You wake up every day, 8:30. We're having our daily huddle, and it can be boring. And so I go back to what Jim Collins wrote. He wrote this idea of having a 20-mile march, and so the reality is he gave a whole story, and you can dive in. Just Google 20-mile march by Jim Collins, and there were two explorers that were racing to, I believe it was the South Pole. And the one that actually did 20 miles every single day, regardless whether there was a storm or it was sunny, it was always 20 miles and then stop, 20 miles and stop, and 20 miles and stop. So over the long term, it's really important to get clear what is the 20 miles that you need to do on a daily basis to make sure that you are going to get to your goal. Because the one that did 20 miles, they smoked the one that, did 30 one day and then 10 the next day and then didn't do anything the next day. And it was just all over the place. You build up the muscle and you build up the momentum and the flywheel to be able to build the skill sets needed in order to take the business to the next level.
Such a powerful insight, Mark. And right even before we hopped on this, we were actually talking about our business and just like really going, what is the big goal and what are the three absolute priorities we have to own? And then once you understand and you have that clarity of those three things, it's like asking yourself on a daily basis, what are three things I can do today that'll just get me a little bit closer to that goal? Like we're talking about a 10-year goal here, really actually an 8-year goal at this point. But what are those consistent things? And I think there's that myth of, the to-do list, right? Like I checked 25 things off the list, but it's like, but is the ball any further down the field? Are you any closer to achieving that priority? So, that's where that huddle you just mentioned comes in, right? It's that clarity on a daily basis. And that's actually the first habit, right? That first habit is having a daily scorecard and metric review, getting every key player on a call first thing in the morning and reporting on what went well the day before, any major update, reporting on their key metric and what is their number one priority for that current day that we're on that huddle for. And when you really do that on a consistent daily basis, we joked around in a sense about this could feel boring, but it's actually a meeting I look forward to every day because I'm getting updates, we're seeing what's happening, we're maybe even discussing very quickly a challenge. Those often get taken offline, to be clear, because it's a 15-minute stand-up meeting, so to speak. But just that ability to solve problems quickly and make sure everybody's aligned. And then most importantly, we're not just putting metrics on some dashboard somewhere that people are forgetting to check. We're having a live conversation around it where everybody can see it. And then that group accountability kicks in, right? Nobody wants to come in with the, we always say the bagel, right? Nobody wants a zero. They want to make sure they're hitting their number. So it's not about it guessing where we are. We know exactly where we are at any given moment in the business, so we can make the most intelligent decision to either get back on track, or if something's going well, do more of the thing that's going, working and going well, right?
Yeah, 100%. Communication and accountability. That is that daily huddle is a that handles that with any sort of growing organization, a daily huddle. 15 minutes. You want to keep it less than that because otherwise it turns into a meeting. And so there's the odd time that we'll go over, but those are more the exceptions and not the rule. And so as we were growing our first company, that's where we were starting to run into issues of, oh, I did, John didn't talk to Sally. And it's like communication just wasn't getting, passed along. And so the huddle, it forces everybody to communicate. And we're like, if there's something that can't be, if something can be communicated in the huddle, save it, share it in the huddle versus sending out a bunch of emails and side conversations. Let everybody hear it, fill everybody in. And so you do that, communication is going to improve immediately. And accountability, like you'd said, John, nobody wants to show up with the bagel. A zero, I didn't do anything, right? And so this is where it's really important to have integrity within the team members. And if you're worrying about somebody, not telling the truth about a metric, then you got a bigger issue there. But that is definitely the first, we'll say, habit, John, that I think for any sort of real estate operator, by doing that on a daily basis, man, what a large impact that makes over the long haul.
That's right. As they say, if you're not measuring it, you're not managing it, right? So every role has a metric. Most roles have two or three. And I think really that's the limit. You might have a few additional that kind of feed up into those larger metrics, but in that huddle, it's the number one most important metric, right? That each team member reports on. And so, I think what also happens in that meeting is the overall knowledge of the whole team grows over time, because it's not like, the update's not, I had a great call with an investor. It's, I had a call with this specific investor. We call them out by name. They shared this with me. This is why they're choosing to invest or not invest or whatever. And this is what I learned from it. Or, our acquisition director might bring in something that he learned from a lender the day before. And so overall, the entire team is gaining that knowledge. It's not just now living in Joe's or Mark's head, it's living in all of our heads. And so just over time, everybody gets smarter, which, once again, will help increase results over time. Number two, weekly issue solving, not just status reporting, right? Like, we don't just talk about the problem, we immediately start coming up with a solution. We follow the IDS framework. So identify the issue, discuss it, and solve for it. So in our weekly level 10 meeting, we're reviewing some key metrics in that meeting. We actually go deeper into the overall metrics, not just the number one most important, but as I mentioned, most team members have at least 2 to 3. We're focusing on priorities, not just progress. So are we making progress towards our quarterly goals that feed into those annual goals, and then those 3, 5, and 10-year goals? But the most important thing is that discussion we have around an issue that's impacting the company. So every week we make that decision. What is that number one issue? And then the whole group comes together. And what's amazing is sometimes the best suggestions come from the people furthest from the issue, just because they're not, right in front of it. They can kind of see it from a different angle, or they provide an insight that may not be the solution, but leads us to that solution, right? So it goes back to, this is all about the culture, right? These meetings are about keeping the team connected, keeping everybody focused on the priorities, and solving those big issues.
Yeah. Next is closing the loop. So this is a big one in regards to communication and having a habit to be able to circle back and instead of just letting things linger. So closing loops, this is a really big one because I mean, not only internally, but externally as well. So, if there's a conversation and somebody said that they were going to do something and for whatever reason you can't do it at the time that you said, making sure that you're circling back and say, hey, that thing I mentioned that I was going to get to you by this date, this actually came up and I just want to let you know that I'm working on it still, and as soon as I know, I'm going to circle back. It's like that's a big one. And that was one thing, John, that I learned negotiating sales is that, with clients. So you're going in, you're making an offer for, a buyer, even for a seller, for example, you're negotiating, right? And there is a offer that comes in and you sign it back to the other party with a certain timeline. Let's just say tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Well, if tomorrow comes and goes at 6 o'clock and you didn't hear back from the other agent, if you wait till 6 o'clock or call it 6:02, like the agents or the clients were like, you could tell they were a little bit upset. I'm like, oh my goodness, like I need to call them even when there's no update, well before the deadline, letting them know there's no update.
Yes.
And so this is something that I experienced when I was actually buying one of my own properties. I saw this firsthand, and this is where it like really stuck. And so thankfully I learned this early in my career. But I bought this property, I was buying this property, and it was like our dream property. And put the offer in, and the agent, I didn't hear anything back, and the deadline, it was getting closer, and I'm sitting around like, "Oh my goodness, like what's going on?" I'm not hearing anything, and I'm the agent buying the property, by the way, right? And so you think, "Oh, you're a professional. I wouldn't sweat it." But this is like the dream property. Like I wanted this property really bad. I wanted to wrap it up, and it's just nothing. And so, deadline comes and goes. I'm like, oh, I don't want to follow up because I don't want them to feel him to think that I want the property too much, right? Finally gets back to me like hours and hours after the deadline. He's like, "Oh, hey, yeah, I just want to let you know I'm sitting down with the clients now, and we'll have a counter for you in a little bit." But this was like hours after the deadline, and as soon as I got the call, I felt better immediately. But I was like stewing for hours, and I thought to myself, "Oh man, clients are going through this. They need to know." So circling back and closing the loop, and even closing the loop when there's no update, is
Yes.
something that is a powerful concept, and it's more of a habit really of how you operate. You're really thinking about other people, and over the long term, man, like what a great person to want to be working with, where you're not wondering what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. In other words, be a follow up machine, right? Let people know what's happening, even if nothing's happening, just those little updates. And for me, it's also that idea when a task is completed, just saying, hey, that thing you asked, want to let you know it's been taken care of and here's
Yeah.
the end result, right? So it's just that idea that everybody's in the loop, right? And that's kind of something we've touched on even with the meetings. That's really the purpose there. Speed of execution is the next one.
Oh,
So
hey,
you
John, just
know
before you get into
yeah.
before you get into speed of execution, that's one thing, closing the loop, that you have a master skill in. I'll tell you that you've been like, that's one of the things that it's like when you're operating on a day-to-day basis, it's like keeping communication flowing throughout the company is something that I know the other team members they would see that in you, and you're a great example I've worked with many people, senior leaders, and through the years, but definitely with yourself, that's been great.
Nah, I appreciate that, Mark. It's definitely something that, I learned from, other people. I observed that behavior and it added value to me. And so, yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. Speed of execution is next. And that's another one that's really close to my heart just because it's how I'm wired. I'm just somebody that I like things off my plate. I don't want things lingering around. And so one of the habits, Mark, I use, I know you're the same. It's like zero inbox is the goal. In other words, my inbox in my email is not just collecting email. Like when I see somebody, in their email accounts open and there's like 3,575, little number on the dot next to their, Gmail app, it's like I almost have a heart attack for them. So for me, things come in, I process it. If it's something I need to handle, it stays in that inbox until it's complete. And then at the end of each day, I need to make sure everything's been resolved within that inbox. So that's just the way a little tool or technique within speed of execution that I utilize. But it's just that idea that it's really about respect, respect for the person you're working with, whether that's a broker who sent you a deal, having the respect to provide feedback, whether it's a deal you're considering or one that's a pass. Respect for our investors who are investing money that it's taken them a lifetime to accrue with us. We owe it to them to respond quickly. But also just from an opportunity standpoint, I mean, right now we're in a kind of an economy where with tariffs and different things, pricing can change on a daily, weekly basis. And so if we sit on a bid for a week and a half, you might go back and find out that bid is now 5% more because something's changed. So, that idea of speed of execution is so critical to us now. One of the things we always think about when we're thinking about speed is not sacrificing our other values, right? So that first class experience, making a wise decision, that operational excellence, those things have to be honored first. So we don't move so fast that we become reckless. But it's just that idea when I'll go back to that example. A broker sends us a deal. Sometimes we have a couple of days before that deal goes online. In other words, now every buyer in the community is going to see it. So if we sit on it for 24, 48 hours, we may now have 70 people we're competing with versus five. And so that speed is ultimately very important. And that just goes back to even closing the loop. Like when something's resolved, let that person know immediately. So it's no longer something they're thinking about or it's hanging over their head. So for us, it's all about any problem, any opportunity should have resolution at minimum within 24 hours, if not by in the same business day.
John, before we move to the next one, the email thing, that's really good. That, and one of the things that when it comes to like inboxes, and I'm not as detailed as you, John, from like from an operational side. I'm more like bigger picture and
Mhm.
the details. And so one of the things that I've realized that about myself, and at the same time, that to ensure alignment with our own values, speed of execution of our company, that's just not okay to say, hey, I'm just, I'm not super organized. So that's where we bringing on an assistant, a really strong EA has been able to make sure that responsiveness is actually happening. And so I'll go into kind of these like 6 hour, like full, I go deep dive, and I'm either making calls where I'm like zone out everything, or I go into like deep think work, or I do writing or whatnot. And so I totally drown everything out. But while I'm offline, I have my EA that's actually going through making sure that responses are happening and communication is still flowing. So if you're listening out there and you're wondering, oh, you know what, I'm not super organized, maybe like John is, like that's where you can hire somebody to be able to help bridge any of those, say, weaknesses to now make it a strength. And then you continue to double down on the things that are your special superpowers. So I think that's where it doesn't, it's not okay just to have that where that's the way you operate. You want to make sure that it's either you're going to improve that side of it to ensure alignment with the values, or you're hiring somebody to bridge that gap. And that's what I do.
Yeah, that's right. I think that idea that every leader should really have conduct a ruthless inventory on themselves. Like, what are they good at? What are they not so
Yeah.
good at? And then building a team around them that help either remove the need for the weakness, right? In other words, like if you're saying, hey, email management's not my thing, let me go find an executive assistant who can handle that for
Yeah.
me. Or it might be just to minimize or reduce, right, those weaknesses and allow you as the leader to do those things that you're ultimately like the best in the
Yeah.
world at, right?
Yeah.
Building relationships with investors, that vision that you have, right? And so, then it comes back to the team building, right? And I think that's not really one that we included in this, update or in this list of 7 habits, but you always have to start with the team, right? In my view, no company has ever achieved success with one person alone. It's the collective team working together.
Just quickly on that, John, because I know from like a courses standpoint and what they're like, yeah, you can go take down a whole multifamily, you can do it, right? And you realize when you start digging in, like you need a village to take these
Yeah.
assets down, and not only like a village of like general operators, like you need ninjas,
Yeah.
like hardcore just to be able to do this, because you have the acquisition with the underwriting. Like you get one number wrong, this is millions and millions of dollars. And so that was John, with you and I, we realized, listen, like we have certain sets, but when it comes down to underwriting deals, like there are guys that have been doing this for decades that have done billions of dollars of acquisition underwriting, and have seen the good, bad, and ugly. And that's where for us, we're just blessed to be able to, we had successful companies before, and we could go out and acquire that talent. But I'll tell you, even you and I, like learning it, there's no way that you can go and compete with somebody that's been doing the only like acquisition underwriting for a decade, where that's the only thing you've been doing. So like you can bridge any sort of weakness with that, and that's where that you have with great talented people. And that's where at the end of the day, with these courses, that they're charging like 40 grand for people to go through, and they're charging these big sums saying, yeah, you can just take these big buildings down. I think that looking at that now, it's like, there's so much that they're just not telling them. What I would say is like, start with like the smaller properties and do everything on your own, and then work your way up. But to go right into a 100-unit apartment building, there you get one number wrong, I mean, like, it could wipe you out in a big way.
That's right. And all your investors too,
Yeah.
most importantly. Yeah, it's interesting, right? There's the question, can I? But there's the question, should you? That I think a lot of people miss. Like, yeah, you could do that, but should you? And I would say no. Just the amount of sheer details we have to manage on a daily basis from, maybe a resident with an issue, or a leak with a plumbing system, or whatever. I mean, things are always coming up, so having that team of ninjas, as you mentioned, behind the scenes helping make sure, is so critical. And that's what allows us to really move quickly, right? Because we have a team of experts around us. So the next one is that these regular on the ground site visits. Mark, it's interesting for us. It's something we just didn't know any differently. Like, we just knew that was something we would need to be doing. And it goes back to the metrics, right? Like, you can't manage what you don't inspect. So if I'm seeing rents are stalling, or maybe we're not hitting our numbers, but I don't go down to the property and talk to the property management team, don't talk to not only the on-site team but also the regionals, right? Is there something happening in the market? But early on, I will say, we closed on the Charleston portfolio, and we quickly realized we had the wrong PM. And how we realized that is because you, George, and I walked on site, and within about an hour of walking on site, we had collected half of a like 5-gallon trash bag of trash. I mean, just cigarette butts, candy wrappers, vape cartridges, anything you can imagine. And I mean, some of it was blowing in from a neighboring property, right? It wasn't necessarily our residents doing it. And the fact that we had to go do that, we don't mind doing it. Nothing's below us. Like, we'll do whatever it takes to succeed. But the fact that every day that property manager walked past that stuff and didn't do it themselves, or asked the maintenance supervisor or the groundskeeper to do it, just sent a very clear message that they weren't aligned with our
Yeah.
values. So those on-site, visits are so critical. But what's also amazing about it, it just gives you an opportunity to build relationships with the property management team, reinforce the culture, get to know them on a personal level. And for example, we had a PM, and they were, had some family issues going on, and we learned that on a site visit. And so we were more able to effectively manage them, offer them to take a little time off, work with them to just try to help them through these challenges. So there's so many reasons to do it, but I'll just sum it up. I've already said it. You can't manage what you don't inspect. So Georgia, our asset manager, is on property pretty much monthly, sometimes every 2 months, just depending on travel schedules. And then myself and you supplement. So usually one of us is on site at least on a monthly basis, walking the property. I mean, I remember when you were in Largo, it was such an interesting thing, because you were like, it was almost perfect, but you noticed something nobody else had detected. And those little doggy stations, some of them were a little rusted out, and so it just didn't have a great aesthetic look. So you caught that, we replaced it. So these little small things that you catch, that sometimes the property manager is, not to fault them, but they see it every single day, and sometimes you start to get a little blind. You miss some of those things. So a fresh set of eyes coming in, it was such a small thing, ultimately isn't going to make or break the deal, but it did make a better resident experience, which is ultra important to us. So those consistent site visits are so critical.
For sure. Next is we call them like after action reviews. So anything big. So if we do a acquisition, a raise, maybe it's like a renovation, we call it an AAR, or an after action review. And by the way, when John said PM, it's property manager. It's just, if you're wondering what PM
Yeah.
is, all this internal lingo,
Yeah,
right?
my
It's
bad, my bad.
no, 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 no. We're good. That was the first time I even caught anything from you, John, with that,
Yeah,
because you were
yeah,
explaining things. But yeah, the after action reviews are really good. It's like, what would we, what would we do different? So what are some things that worked, and some of the things that we would do different, or some of the things that didn't go well, and actually looking at it with like real truth of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's a great time to celebrate. It's a great time to look at how could we do it better.
yeah,
And one of the things, John, when you're with this after action review, why it's so helpful is because if you're going to, like, for example, we were just talking about our overall vision. So for us, we want to have 100 communities, 10,000 residents. We want to help 10,000 residents have a better living experience. That's what we want to do. And we want to provide the best investing experience for our investors. And, 10,000 residents would say, yep, we checked the box. It's a BHAG. We've made enough impact in the world. And we've created really a better world by providing a better living experience. But one of the things, there's like three big goals or priorities that sit under that. Number one is $1 billion in equity that needs to be raised, because John and you and I, just we don't have $1 billion sitting there. So we're finding great investors that are actually being attracted because the deals are so strong to us. So that's one. We know that's like a big part. And the second one is, if we're going through 300 properties to find one, we know that 100 communities, it's going to take us 30,000 properties to underwrite. 30,000. So this means that every time you do an underwriting of a deal, if you keep doing something that's going to take you an extra 10 minutes, you're going to spend 10 minutes extra on 30,000 different underwriting like different properties that you're assessing. And so if you can go through one and actually look at it with a magnifying glass and say, hey, what can we do better and improve? You can move through things. You can get through things faster with less stress. And that's how companies scale, is they get very effective at what they do. For example, with our real estate brokerage business, Faris team, we have feature books that when we first started, we deliver them, the property would go on the market, because they were like full on books, magazines. Like, we do such a good job with them that it took us like 2 weeks to get the feature books to the client. The problem is that the property was sold a lot of the times by the time they got their feature books, where buyers could actually get to take them with them, and the seller gets them. They're like, oh, great, this is a good keepsake, but we sold the house. Ha ha ha. The problem there was that we weren't efficient on that. Now, some people are like, that's how long it takes. But through consistently doing these after action reviews, it took us a week to do it. And then took us a few days, and now we can actually go in with photo and video on a Wednesday. Okay, photo videos are done on a Wednesday, and then we have overnight editors that are actually breaking down all the photos, doing all the editing, doing all the write-ups, and so that we can actually deliver feature books in a nice, beautiful package and delivered by the next day, so that when they wake up Friday morning, they have feature books, and they know. And so the reason we were delivering them the same day, but then we did after action review, we found out from our clients that, oh, they do not like waking up in the morning and getting feature books at noon, because if they're going on the market in the morning on Friday morning, then they're like frantic that I don't have the feature books yet. So we had
Yeah.
to deliver them the night before, so they woke up with peace of mind. And we only got there by being extremely focused, maniacally focused on the client experience and doing these after action reviews.
Well, and it's so powerful because you said it right. There was probably folks, and I wasn't there for these conversations, but there were probably folks on the team that kept saying it can't be done,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so,
100%.
but there's always a solution. There's always an approach. And one of my favorite fundamentals that we have at Faris Capital Partners is find a way. There's always a way, and it may not be the perfect way. It may take a little extra work. It may take hiring overnight people to get it done, but you figured it out. And so, with those after action reviews, surveying your clients, talking to the team and building that level of trust, that's where those big magical things happen. I bet you could actually go talk to 100 real estate brokers right now and say, do you think you could turn a feature book in 24 hours? They tell you you're out of your mind, but you got it done and you're getting it done consistently. I love it. And I think that actually rolls nicely into the seventh one, which is really like personal discipline, right? Like, from just a personal standpoint, right? As leaders, and I would say really as anybody within a company, but like as leaders, we have a responsibility to be at our best, right? To be as sharp as possible, to have clear minds, and a good mindset. And so, number one, having a routine, right? I'm a morning guy. I know some people that, can't even imagine working out in the morning, and they work out at 7 p.m. So I'm a little bit different. I don't tell people they have to wake up at 5 in the morning, although I do. It's just what works really well for you. But I know, Mark, you're somebody who's highly disciplined, right?
Yeah.
Like you're putting in these time blocks for that deep focus work every morning. I mean, here you are, running Faris Capital Partners, actively raising capital, writing a book. And I know your Ferris team is minimal oversight. You've got a really great team that's running that day to day, so that in no way is a full time pursuit, right? It's a couple hours a week, but you're getting all this big stuff done, and it's because you're time blocking. It's because you're
Yeah.
waking up in the morning. You're probably, I would imagine, journaling. Writing down the top priorities for the day, and then blocking your calendar to get those things done. So those morning routine, those deep work blocks, having focus sprints, as we like to call them, and really taking really good care of yourself. So I know this sometimes rubs people the wrong way, but I believe I have a duty to eat well and exercise. Those things help me be a better leader because I'm sharper, I'm more focused, less likely to get sick. I'm burning off some of that energy, right, which working out is a big part of, and it helps me be more clear and a little less like tense because I've already got some of that stuff out of my system, right? So I think it's so important, that personal development. Now, I'll say it's interesting, Mark, because within our team, like, we don't mandate this stuff. I mean, we have some fundamentals built around it, and we say we suggest these things. But it's so interesting. I mean, our marketing director is, plays cricket and badminton. We have a inside salesperson who's training for ultra marathons, and I mean, it kind of is catching on within the company. So we're not forcing it to happen, but I would say, I know for me personally that if I'm not doing these things consistently, I can feel myself getting down. I can feel myself getting frustrated. And so I've just learned that that's just, it's just a part of who I am. I've got to wake up,
Mm.
read, breathe, exercise, and now I'm clear and ready to do my day.
Yeah. Man, like I've had it before where I didn't notice it when I was younger. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's interesting. So I'm 42 now. People are like, how old are you? I'm 42, 2025. So there you go. You got my age. And it's interesting because I've noticed it more so when I broke into the 40s that if I don't have like a good night's sleep, like if I'm under 6 hours, I notice like my mood and just how I feel is like significantly impacted. I find that my tolerance level and my ability to actually like I'm more just say agitated,
Yeah.
just like little things bug me. And it's like it's real. And I there was this one day I was like there's a couple things that came up and after I'm like, what was that about? There was like a comment. I was like looking at myself. It was like
I was just so
there's a
worked
one
up.
common
Yeah.
denominator, and there was a couple of things that happened, and I was in both of them, and so I was like, oh wow, and I actually realized that like I had like 4 hours of sleep that night, and it was like
Mm-hmm.
that was real. And so, John, you're right, is because when you're operating at a certain, like, we're taking down, like, these were $20 million plus assets that we're running. Like, we run billion-dollar sales organizations, like, and you have that kind of pressure and stress on you on a daily basis. Like, that is not just something you kind of wake up and you just kind of stroll into the office with kind of the lackadaisical mindset. It's like waking up in the morning, and that's where, John, like, I'm so quarter to five, like, because 5 o'clock I go into this gym across the street, and so that's been like phenomenal. I'm up, I'll write down the big goal for the day. Like for us is the 10,000. So it's like 10,000 residents, 100 communities. That's what we want to serve. And then, what are a couple things that will take me closer to that? Like, what are the actions for today that I need? If you can just get clear on that, that's been super powerful. And then even in the morning, John, another thing that I've been doing that's been a huge impact is that just like being grateful. Like, so
Mm.
thinking about things you're thankful for when you first wake up, like the first couple minutes, I find if I can, instead of waking up like, oh, my back's a little bit sore. Oh,
Yeah.
I shouldn't have eaten so late or whatever. This kind of mindset that's saying, I'm thinking like, thank you, Lord, for looking after me and for all the gifts that you've given me. It's like, thank you for Joanna. Thank you for my three boys. Thank you for Fair's Capital and the badasses that are working over there. And thank you and getting and then feeling those feelings. Like I'm telling you, that has been a game changer because it sets the tone for the rest of the day. And the days that I don't do it, I was like, I've noticed as like, oh man, like I'm not really feeling that good right now. And
Right.
it's like, so thankful, being impactful, writing down, and then getting some physical exercise, and then boom, you get into focus time. Like you have to do that when you're operating at a high level. Otherwise, you'll feel crushed over time, and it'll just run you out of the business. And the reality is that too many people are relying on you, and you have to look at yourself as an Olympic athlete and treat yourself because your body is going through extreme pressure when you're operating at that level. And I think that that's been something that I had to learn the hard way, so to speak.
I love that gratitude component. As you know, I read a lot, but I also read a lot of fiction as well as like business and leadership books. And I'm kind of somewhat paraphrasing, but in Lonesome Dove, one of the characters says, the secret to life is learning to appreciate all the little everyday things. And I think sometimes we sometimes lose sight of that, right? Just the support that you get from your spouse, the love from your children. I just got back from a family vacation, and it's just like just the appreciation that I built a life for my family where we get to do those types of things. I mean, not everybody can go on a vacation, a year, or let alone two or three, right? And so those little everyday things, right? It's what life's all about. So I love it, Mark, and I think that it's why you and I have found that success. But it's funny, I'm thinking back. I mean, so in my teenage years, I was playing sports, I exercised a lot in college, and then in my 20s, I started selling real estate. And so I wasn't really gaining weight, but I wasn't really exercising, and I was eating Chick-fil-A on the road between appointments. And it was around 30, all of a sudden I started feeling off. I'm like, I think I might need to get some new pants. Like they're fitting a little tight. And so that's when I started the exercise habits and some of those things. And what was interesting, it was all about vanity. I wanted to lose some weight. I didn't want to be overweight or out of shape or whatever, but I quickly realized it was helping me in my life. Like I was becoming a better father, a better salesperson, and eventually a better leader when I was in leadership. So, sometimes those lessons come to you a little bit later in life, but the key is once you learn it to just implement it and never forget. So, to sum it all up, really, excellence just sometimes just lives in the daily rhythms. It's not always the major moves. It's just little things done well on a daily basis. It's closing the loop. It's moving quickly. It's debriefing after any major event and learning from what you can, what went well, right? Like you said it earlier, sometimes it's like, we should be doing more of this, eliminate that, doing less of this, track everything. And just the importance of culture and ownership when it comes to the company, how we run the company, those decisions that we make. Are we honoring our culture? Are we moving quickly? Are we doing the right things and taking extreme ownership? So love it, Mark.
Yeah, right on. As we wrap up here, what you put in your body is your fuel. And so, John, what I went through, you had said Chick-fil-A. For
Yeah.
me, it used to be Red Bull and Skittles. That's how you.
Well, at least I was getting some protein. I feel a little bit better now.
It'd be a short hit, and then it was just like it's like, oh geez, like that is not something you want to build. We're talking about fueling the sports car here, and that
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
wasn't doing it. So we've been through that, but the reality is long term, if you want to win, you got to do the small habitual things that will drive overall success. And if you do it on a daily basis, it becomes less of this hard thing that you're doing. It just becomes part of your everyday, and you stop thinking about it, which is great. But you've set in motion the habits that will take you to long-term success. And so
that's right.
that's where John and I, we've shared some of the best that we've seen, and hopefully this was valuable for you. Now, if you are thinking about investing into real estate and you'd like to learn more about some of the deals that we're doing, go to fulloutinvesting.com, and we actually have a sample deal in there, and we talk all about the overall thesis and the types of deals that we go after, and why we believe multifamily real estate is the ultimate wealth building vehicle. It's the ultimate that we've been able to find, and then how we're operating on a regular day-to-day basis as well. Thanks for listening, guys. If you enjoyed the show, please share and subscribe to the channel. where high net worth investors come to learn more about multifamily investing. We love and believe in you guys. Keep dreaming and investing big.